the second. Unto thee, O Lord.
Unto thee, O Lord.
Do I lift up my soul.
Do I lift up my soul.
Unto thee, O Lord.
Unto thee, O Lord.
Do I lift up my soul.
Do I lift up my soul.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
I trust in thee.
I trust in thee. Let me not be ashamed when all my enemies triumph over me.
Yet on that way.
Yet on that way.
Only be ashamed.
Only be ashamed. Yet on that way.
Only be ashamed.
Only be ashamed.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. I trust in thee. Let me not be ashamed when all my enemies triumph over me.
Remember not
Remember
the sins
not
of my youth.
the sins of my youth.
Remember not
Remember
the sins
not
of my youth.
the sins of my
Oh
youth.
my God.
Oh my
I
God.
trust in thee.
I trust in thee. Let me not be ashamed when all my enemies triumph over me.
567. 567. Restore my spirit, Lord, I need restore. My heart is weary, please help me, dear Lord. I stand in need of more strength from your word.
Renew my love, rebuild my faith, restore my soul.
Revive the fire, Lord, within my soul. Stir my desire to work in your fold. Light in my heart, dear God, your zeal profound.
Renew my love, rebuild my faith, restore my soul.
Renew my
Courage,
courage,
Lord, it needs restored.
My cup is empty, refill it, dear Lord. Replace all doubts and fear with faith so bold.
Renew my love, renew my faith, restore my soul.
Mark your Psalms, page 905. 905. Is Gene doing okay? Well, I was about to say, she went to work last couple of days, came home today. Came through the door looking like she just fell in about that sore. So I think she had a rough day at work, so she's at home. Huh? Oh, okay. So yeah, she stayed home on Monday and said she was feeling better. You know, no, I'm not gonna get in trouble. She may be watching. Well, y'all say men are stubborn, you know. It's not a gender issue.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I see your wife nodding her head. Okay, we're still in Paul's third preaching word at Ephesus. But I want to stop here and look at some things concerning Paul while he was at Ephesus. There's some things about Paul that if we take time to really understand, he, never forgot about the places he'd been to. You remember when he started this preaching tour, he first went through Galatia and Phrygia. And while he's here, it seems most likely he wrote his first letter to Corinth, and he wrote a mission letter to Corinth. In that first Corinthians 5:9, we say, I wrote you in my epistle not to keep company with sexually immoral people. In that context there that he uses, but the point that he's making there is the point that we're looking at is, he says in my epistle, which means there had to be a previous epistle written, and most likely written from Ephesus. He was there for about 2.5 to 3 years, from what we can figure. And there's some other things that from the letter that makes a question. He shows the concern in the first letter. And I brought in this verse because I'm going to look at this. It says in 1 Corinthians 1:11, the reason he wrote this letter, started his letter, it says, been declared to be concerning you, my brethren, by those of Chloe's household, that there are contentions among you. So there's that point there. He starts out the letter. He talks about them pleading with them to be the same mind, same judgment. But it shows a concern for them, a great concern. And there's obviously either he had received a letter from Chloe's household or a visit. And I'd almost say with everything that is brought up within the letter going to them, it was probably a visit. And I think we should keep that in mind. I kind of zoomed this out a little bit. How close Ephesus is to Corinth? By water. See, it wouldn't be that hard for somebody to go to one place or the other and to get back. And even in that time frame, it would probably be a 2-day journey by boat at that time. And so, for them, for those people, when they travel, 2 days wasn't that big a deal. Compared to walking. How long it take to walk? But and I'm talking about as much as they would walk, 2 days by boat would be a short time. And I want to bring that up because there's another question that we have to consider. Did he visit Corinth while he was at Ephesus? And Luke just not recorded. Now, I want us to think about this point. Where was Luke at this time? Most likely, where was Luke? Where did we last read Luke use we? Macedonia, Philippi. When they're in Macedonia and Philippi was the last time. And look, when they arrive in Philippi, he says we. When they leave, he says they. And so that kind of excludes him from it. And we will not read a we again until he goes back through Macedonia. And after that. Now, the thing of it, he says, now notice this will be the third time I am coming to you. By the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every word shall be established.
This is a response, and this is in 2 Corinthians. And the response is to people questioning whether or not he's an apostle. And now, here's the interesting thing. Some have said, well, third time means third letter. Missing letter, this letter, or 1 Corinthians and then 2 Corinthians. The problem comes in when you put in the next verse. I have told you before, foretell as if I were present the second time, and now being absent, I write to those who have sinned before and to all the rest, that if I come again, I will not spare it. Okay? Now that's the New King James Version. It's very similar to the King James. The question is, as if I were present the second time. Okay? How many times had Paul been to Corinth that we could say, according to the book of Acts, at this time? That we could definitively say. How many times had Paul been to Corinth? How many could we definitively say at the time that we're talking about being in Ephesus? From the book of Acts. At this point, only once. Because he left there, went to Ephesus, left Ephesus, went back to Jerusalem, started his third missionary journey, came through Galatia and Phrygia, and now is in Ephesus. Okay? So that's on, according to the book of Acts, that's the only time, and he's saying, I'm planning to come to you. He says, if this letter is third, then that's it, but is it that, notice that point, I've told you before, Kelly, as if I were present the second time. A little confused. Was he saying as if he were going to be present, had been present, or if he was present? Okay? So I stuck in some different versions. ESV. Just skip down to verse 2. I warn those who sinned before and all the others, and I warn them now while absent, as I did when present on my second visit, that if I come again, I will not spare them. In the ASV, American Standard, it comes that way again. I've said beforehand, I do say beforehand as when I was present the second time. He's saying, I've said it before. I'm saying it to you before I get there, just as I said when I was present the second time. Okay? So now being absent to them that have sinned hereto and to all the rest that have come again, I will not spare. So when we get there and look at these verses, and the NASAB is very similar to the ASV, other than some of the wordings, but it still has that second time. Now here's the thing, you tie this in here with Acts 19:21 and 22, it says, when those things were accomplished, Paul purposed in the Spirit, when he had passed through Macedonia and Achaia to go to Jerusalem, saying, after I've been there, I must also see Rome. So this is Luke recording this. In that time frame, he wrote 1 Corinthians. It appears that he wrote 2 Corinthians from Macedonia. And look, he was planning to go to Achaia from Macedonia. And so it would be that he would go up by land. It implies that somewhere in this, he made a trip over to Corinth and has a visit. And probably addresses some of these problems and probably actually happened before he wrote 1 Corinthians. It's probably that letter that he wrote and then went there, then came back, and then Chloe's household, do you think you solved everything when you left? Here's more problems. Or either in between the time he writes 1 Corinthians 7. And Luke even tells us that this time he sent Macedonia two of those who ministered to him, Timothy and Erastus, but he himself stayed in Asia for a time. You know, the last thing we read is just before the Exodus, is that he is there, it tells us, for 2 years teaching the school of Tyrannus. It doesn't tell us how long after that, and we assume, because that's the best we can do, is that everything that happens from there on is part of that until he leaves. But how many times have we left and went somewhere and came back and we didn't count it as a trip or anything, right? You know, and necessarily, here's the other point. Why don't we have the very first letter he wrote?
Why do we have?
Why don't we?
Why don't we? Yeah, that always begs the question that apparently everything that Paul wrote wasn't inspired, because then we wouldn't have the whole inspiration of God. But we believe that we do have the whole inspiration of God. So some of the things that he wrote must not have been inspired. So it makes it, the guys that had to decide what letters went in the canon had a really tough time.
Well, I don't know that I would go so far as to say they weren't inspired, but that they weren't needed to be preserved.
Or maybe it's sometimes it didn't be revealed yet.
We didn't get them, that's what I'm saying. They didn't need to be preserved. It wasn't needful for the future point.
Might still be found.
Well, something might be found, but if they found it, I'd really be questioning whether it was authentic at this time, this far down the road, with nothing to compare it to. That's the thing. One of the rules that they used when they put together the canon was they chose things that were already being looked at as scripture. There were things, it's ironic, even in the 2nd century, a lot of the problems Corinth was having at the time of Paul's writing, they were having a century later, and there were those that were quoting what Paul had told them before, trying to straighten them out. Irenaeus comes to mind. So when you think about that, you kind of go that point. But there is a point that God gives what we need. When Paul writes a letter to Colossae, he tells them, when you read this epistle, make sure you also read the epistle to the Laodiceans. And we don't have that epistle, but the belief is those two were so probably close together that they were conferring one another, and God said, well, you only need one. Because a lot of what's written in the book of Colossians is conferred in Ephesians. There's not much in Colossae that wasn't written about in the book of Ephesus. So, that's a point, and we have to trust. And I think it's more, as Ron pointed out, not inspired or not needed. It's one of those two things.
It was a providence of God that it ended up. There are a lot of other letters that were written. Because I didn't buy it, I wish I had now, but there was a book about this thing I looked at in the bookstore. And it was books that didn't make the Bible.
Right.
And they were letters that, some of these writers had written, but they weren't chosen to be in the Bible.
And
there were partial letters that they didn't have all the letters. Some of the letters were destroyed. They only had parts of it, things like that.
And some of them that came into a question of authenticity. Was it actually that writer? That was,
Or another John or somebody else.
Yeah, or somebody using a pseudonym claiming to be. And so a lot of those things didn't make it for those reasons.
I believe that, but back to the point, it was the will of God that we ended up with.
There we go. It goes back to the promised will of God. What was preserved, that's what we have. We have to believe in that providence that he got us into this, and we have everything that's needful. Okay? But that point that he did write it, it's obviously he wrote one. And it kind of that point in, we have to trust in God. We don't need it. Okay? And so there's some things he addressed. Now in this making a future plans, when we read 1 Corinthians 16:3-7, it says, when I come, whomever you approve by your letters, I will send to bear your gift in Jerusalem. But if it's fitting that I go also, they will go with me. Now I will come to you when I pass through Macedonia, for I am passing through Macedonia. And it may be that I will remain or even spend the winter with you, that you may send me on my journey whenever I go. For I do not wish to see you now on the way, but I hope to stay a while with you if the Lord permits. So he's making that point that he's going to go up through Macedonia and then come down to Achaia before he goes to Jerusalem. And he's not going to do it hurriedly because he wants to be able to spend some time there. So it's a great concern, and that point of future plans points to the fact that there was probably a visit that we just don't have. And when you look at 1 Corinthians 6, 8 to 11, it says, but I will tarry in Ephesus, the rest of that, until Pentecost. For a great and effective door is open to me, and there are many adversaries. Now if Timothy comes, see that he may be with you without fear, for he does the work of the Lord, as I also do. Therefore let no one despise him, but send him on his journey in peace, that he may come to me, for I am waiting for him with the brethren. So there's an indication, I'm in Ephesus. And I'm writing this letter while at Ephesus. So it's pretty clear, when that visit took place, it may have been before he wrote this letter or after he wrote this letter, a short visit. Most likely before, my opinion, let me put it that way, opinion, I guess that's about all I can do, to say my opinion. It indicates, and the Bible indicates, infers that there was that visit.
And, it kind of goes back to the statement about Jesus, the Bible making about Jesus, all the things he did would fill volumes and volumes of books. Well, the things the apostles did would probably fill volumes and volumes of books. But it wasn't necessary to record all the things that Jesus did, and it wasn't necessary to record everything the apostles did. But what was recorded was what we need.
And I think that point of what we need, what do we need to establish our faith?
Establish the church,
Establish faith, maintain church, know how to live faithful before God. Those are what we need. Here's the reality. If what we have can't make someone have faith, even if we had it all, it wouldn't change their mind. They wouldn't have faith.
Like the rich man in Lazarus.
Yeah, and that's where I was thinking. Just like Abraham told the rich man, if they don't believe Moses and the prophets and the things that were done by them, they're not going to believe even though one comes from the dead. And it's interesting because when you read that, Jesus is talking to Pharisees, and he's basically telling them, you won't even have faith when I raise from the dead. And they did. So there's that point there, and I think sometimes we frustrate ourselves trying to get people to listen, that it doesn't matter how much we tell them, they're never going to listen. And the only thing we can do is take our opportunity and pray that they'll receive it. And but it comes back. What do we need? We've got what we need. And so that's the thing that we need to realize. And Don's right on the track, because he was thinking just like I was about that rich man and Lazarus. When Abraham told that rich man, what was his deal? I got 5 brothers. Send Lazarus back so they don't come and share in my faith. There ain't a person in torment in Hades that probably hasn't requested that. Let me go tell my family. Send somebody to tell my family. There's one question, Ron. Go ahead. If it takes seeing somebody raised from the dead to have faith to come back and visit you, is it still faith?
That's proof.
Huh?
That's proof.
That's proof. It's no longer faith. Ron, what are you doing?
Well, I was just thinking, there's kind of a clue maybe about that third visit to Corinth, because at the end of Titus, he tells him to come to him at Nicopolis, because I plan to spend the winter there. And Nicopolis is north, kind of northwest, but just north of Corinth.
And we'll probably get into that.
That's a trip that we didn't know about, except for the mention that he's told Titus that he would be, and told Timothy, yes.
Yeah, see, Nicopolis is
This is
between Troas and Philippi.
No, Nicopolis is just above the A in Achaia, not Neapolis.
Oh, Nicopolis, okay, all right. I see.
Nicopolis is on the west coast of Macedonia.
Okay,
It's a place where we don't have to visit or anything, but
the
it
obviously
mentions it in Titus that he's staying in the west, plans to
stay in the winter there. And that's where we put some of our timelines in, because from what we have, let me put it this way, as far as the book of Acts is concerned, these are his last visits to this area.
It's highlights, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm saying, we don't have any real writings concerning the first and second imprisonment of his travels. So as what we confirm through the scriptures, these are his last writings, our last visits. Now, Titus, he says he left him in Crete. And Timothy, he said he left him in Ephesus in 1 Timothy. And so the appearance is that, 2 Timothy is obviously part of his second imprisonment, because he's about to die this time, and he alludes to that in chapter 4, my first offense, nobody stood with me. And so in that point that he says, I'm about to die. So 1 Timothy at Ephesus and Titus at Crete. But you say in Titus, he says to meet him at Nicopolis. Okay, so that might be worth looking into to see, because we know he left him in Crete. We don't know when he went to Crete. Go back over to our map, because I don't know if I have our map up there.
There's a lot of little interesting tidbits in there, but like you said,
There are little things that, and you see where Crete is.
Now, my Bible, the map shows that was his fourth missionary.
That he left him in Crete on his way to Rome.
They went to Crete.
Well, I mean, he called it Wood. I think Fair Havens was in the island of Crete. But, so that would be it, but that would probably not be, unless, his point is that Titus is in that inner prison time he's out of his first imprisonment, second imprisonment. It could be that he left him there and then went and visited Achaia.
Yeah, that was on his journey to Rome.
So, but again, we don't know the first time when he went. And so, if he did,
I'll have to wait till you get there and ask me.
but there's little tidbits that, like I said, some things we can narrow down, other things it's kind of hard to, you're going to come into a point of your conclusion, and it's going to be one of the things you can't say, you have to accept this. You can't say that, because you're going to have evidence somewhere. Here's what you can say. You can clearly say at some point, when Titus was in Crete, because that's where Titus is when he writes the letter to him, he planned to winter in Neapolis, whatever. That place that Ron mentioned, before I mess it up anymore, and that was up above car rent. And so, when, we can't definitely say, okay? Now, we do see the plans here, just as we read those plans in Acts, that he's planning to go up through Macedonia, or go through Macedonia before he came to Corinth. He says that the same here, okay? Now,
Note that if the Lord permits, that's a good thing.
if the Lord permits, well, you know, maybe that's something Paul learned. When he first wanted to go out throughout Asia, what did he say? No, he said, the Lord, the Holy Spirit permitted us. So basically, he's saying the Lord did permit it. And that's how they went up to Macedonia on the second. Okay? The other thing that we have is that at some point after the writing of 1 Corinthians, he sends Titus to them. Now, when you read 1 Corinthians, it appears that Timothy went there, delivered the letter, or was to deliver the letter. But yet, when we get into the book, we find more about Titus, so it's almost like Titus was sent in a follow-up visit after the first letter. So therefore we have been comforted in your comfort, and we rejoice exceedingly more for the joy of Titus, because the Spirit has been refreshed by you all. When we first started preaching school, Jackie Steersman asked the question, how many of you guys would like to go and work with a church like Corinth? I want you to think about that. What's that point? Corinth's got, look at Corinth and you see it, you think, man, there's a lot of problems there, right? Read those letters. Okay? So this kind of indicates it's not just modern day thinking, it was kind of that thinking there. Look at what he says about that. Because the Spirit has been refreshed by you all. Titus is going to Corinth, and man, I don't know if I'm going to go over there. Right?
How many churches would hire Paul with his resume?
Well, that's true. You know, that we went through that too.
Been in prison for a couple of times.
Put to death, like, okay. But beforehand, incited riots, been beaten, you know, everywhere it went, hated. Yeah. But the point that we're saying is they did have that reputation even back then. It's like Titus is kind of like treading going over there. And notice what he says, because the Spirit has been refreshed. So he's seen that the letter has had some good. Some good things have been done. Just like the person in the problem with the spiritual immorality, he's repented. He's corrected the situation. And now, if anything I boast him about you, I'm not ashamed, for we spoke all things to you in truth. Even so, our boasting to Titus was found true, and his affections are greater for you, as he remembers the obedience of you all, how with fear and trembling you received him. So either it was he was dreading to get there, or he had seen so many problems he needed something to lift him up. You know, here's the reality. Is it easy? Is it always easy to be a Christian? If it was, we would never have half of the letters we got, because most of them are about encouraging. How many times we were warned not to grow weary? So if it's discouraging for us, it can be discouraging for them.
Corinth had such a bad reputation that the Greeks incorporated a word into their language that meant to live like a Corinthian. It meant to live in debauchery and licentiousness and all of that. They actually had a word for it.
I remember when we were there, this one man said he wasn't sure if they deserved the reputation he had, and then we're going through the things that They show there and everything, and I'm sitting there like, yeah, they did. You know, the relics, they deserved the reputation they had. You know,
Probably for the same reason nobody names their kid Joseph.
nobody uses them. I'm gonna stop there. 2 Corinthians 8, 1 through 6, we read, moreover, brethren, when we made known to you the grace of God bestowed on the church of Macedonia, that in a great trial of affliction, the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty abounded in the riches of their liberality. For I bear witness that according to their ability, yes, and beyond their ability, they were freely willing, imploring us with urgency that we should receive the gift and fellowship of the ministry to the saints. This is part of the things that Paul has been telling Titus, but notice what he said. And not only as we had hoped, but they first gave themselves to the Lord and then to us by the will of God. So we urge Titus that he, as he had begun, so we'd also complete this grace in you as well. So it's kind of the point that Titus was sent to make sure what they're instructed of in 1 Corinthians, that collection for the saints was being done. And to tell them how it was being done. But notice that I got Titus and a brother. Okay? In questions that came up concerning Paul and what he did in verses 17 and 18, it says, did I take advantage of you by any of those whom I sent to you? I urged Titus and sent our brother with him. Did Titus take advantage of you? Did we walk in the same spirit? Did we not walk in the same steps? So that Titus didn't go there alone. And we don't know who this brother was. But you know, I thought about it today. Wouldn't that be wonderful to God say, our brother? If that's all he said about you, our brother. You know, sometimes we get this attitude, we want to make sure our name is known. No, just be said. He's one of mine. That's enough. Or it should be enough. You know, we could go through, and I thought about trying to do that for one of the proposals, find out, go through all the book, all Paul's companions, all the ones that he had, different places and everything. But what about those that aren't named? I mean, let me ask this. Would you rather be this our brother that went with Titus, or be known as Demas? Huh? I'd rather be our brother, our no-name brother, than be the one that was named as forsaken me for this present world. Sometimes there's an advantage to not being named. All right, so we're through all that with the car rent. I brought this in there because I brought it up a couple weeks ago. This is the library, the front of the library that's been restored. That was at Ephesus. So just a little throw in there because now we're getting back to what's going on at Ephesus. Looking at that clock, I don't know if we'll get through it all. Well, we'll start. I have a question in my mind. In 2 Timothy 4, we read about Alexander the coppersmith. And then we have Demetrius the silversmith. So in verse 22 to 27, we go back up to where he sent into Macedonia two of those who ministered, Timothy and Erastus. But he himself stayed in Asia for a time. And about that time, what's that time?
About the time that he sent those two off.
Let's say they stayed in Asia for a time. I think it says there arose a great commotion about the way. So in that time frame, and I think we had to put this together, during that time that he remained in Ephesus, there arose a great commotion about the way. And it's leading up to a point. Okay? I don't think we can read verse 23 and say, and then immediately, verse 24 happened. Because he said he stayed for a time. When we get to end this, he's going to leave. And so I think there was a building up of this point, that this great commotion about the way, this questioning about people being taught and what they're being taught, to the point that it carries on to where it comes down to Demetrius. It says, for a certain man named Demetrius, a silversmith who made silver shrines of Diana, brought no small profit to the craftsmen. He called them together with the workers of similar occupation, said, men, you know that we have our prosperity by this trade. Moreover, you see and hear that not only at Ephesus, but throughout almost all Asia, this Paul has persuaded and turned away many people, saying that they are not gods which are made with hands. Okay, let's stop there. Is he lying? Nope. He's not lying one bit. What's his question? What's his problem? He's losing money. The more people, less statues he's going to sell, less idols. So the whole point of it is we're going to lose it. See, so he says, not only is this trade of ours in danger of falling into disrepute, but also the temple of the great goddess Diana may be despised or magnificent, destroyed, whom all Asia and the world worship. Was he a prophet? Or just a man that realized this is the possibility?
Just realize the possibility.
Realize the possibility, but
Through this realization, God used it and said, well, yeah, this is going to happen, but
there we go. He realized it.
he didn't have any insight.
He didn't have any insight, but he did understand that if people quit worshiping these idols,
Right. It's going to fall disrepair.
disrepair. Now, here's the thing. Guess what they haven't found in Ephesus?
The temple.
Temple of Diana. They found a gate to Domitian's temple. They haven't found Diana's temple yet. They may have pieces of it and just not know it, but as far as they know, they don't have it. So that's why God said at that point, yeah, it's going away. God's going to show you this isn't any real. So then it moves. It grows to the point that it moves. It says, now when they heard this, they were full of wrath and cried out, great is Diana of the Ephesians. So the whole city was filled with confusion and rushed into the theater with one accord, having seen Gaius and Aristarchus, I'm probably saying that wrong, Macedonians, Paul's travel companions. So here's some more that they've taken them in. Now, when you think about this amphitheater, I want to think, if you're not looking up the picture yet, I'm going to show you one. But how big do you think it might be? In our mindset, when we read this, how thing do we think it would be?
Private size of Supreme Court, something like that.
Size of the Supreme Court.
Or bigger.
Okay, Supreme Court, if I'm not mistaken, can hold about 350 people in it.
Bigger than.
Okay, now at Pompeii, they covered the amphitheater and it would seat about, I think what they guesstimate, about 1,500 people, if I remember right. Now, I want you to see the point when Paul wanted to go into the people, the disciples would not allow him. Okay? Why? They've already seized two guys. What happens if Paul goes in?
They're nuts.
Huh?
They go nuts.
They're going that some of the officials of Asia who were his friends sent to him, pleading that he would not venture into the, don't go in there. It's not good for you. It's not good for the city. Some therefore cried one thing and some another, for the assembly was confused, and most of them did not know why they had come together. And that's usually what happens when there's a riot. People get caught up in it, don't even know what's going on. There's the amphitheater. There's a view from the amphitheater, from there. Okay? There it is from as you walk away from it, actually. Okay? That's as if you were sitting in it looking down. That's from the side. I think that probably gives you the best idea how long it is. How many people do you think it fit?
Well, you fit the whole Congress in there.
Whole Congress and then some.
And then some.
Pretty big area.
Okay.
Do you know?
I remember what they told us, and I think I took the one picture out. But, yeah, because we had Lord's Supper there. We had services and Lord's Supper there on Sunday morning.
It's like about 3/4 of a football field.
Yeah.
Just guessing.
Okay. Take that middle section up there that you're looking at. About half of it, just one of those sections spread over, and about halfway up, over 60 people. So about 100 people, 100 plus people to every one of those sections. I think they estimated approximately around 7,000 to 8,000. Okay. Now here's the thing you gotta realize. When this is all going on, it was packed. That's how many people they had stirred up against Paul. So what's going to happen to Paul if he walks in there?
There'll be no Paul.
There'll be no Paul. Okay? So that's part of the point. They're in an uproar. And notice they drew Alexander out of the multitude, and the Jews putting him forward, and Alexander motioned his hand and wanted to make this defense to the people. Okay? Let me ask this question. Why do you think the Jews put him out there? Huh? This is a Christian. Okay? Two things you got to realize. At this time frame, Christianity was considered a sect of Judaism. Okay? So the Jews, not wanting to get blamed for what Paul is doing, says, here, take a Christian. We'll sacrifice him. And he's wanting to make a defense. But notice, but when they found out that he was a Jew, all with one voice cried out for about 2 hours, great is Diana of the Ephesians. Why him being a Jew with that? Why? When they recognized he was a Jew, would it cause them to go on there?
The Jews wouldn't worship Diana, they were worshiping their God in the temple or in the,
And what did they believe?
they believed in their one God.
In one God and not idol gods. So they believed in the same thing that Paul had been teaching. And so to those people, they were no different from Christians. Which kind of, get us to understand something here. When Judaism is declared illegal, the practice of Judaism by the Roman Empire after the fall of Jerusalem, after that last rebellion where they're fed up with them, they wipe everything, declares it illegally. What does that do to Christianity?
That makes Christianity illegal too.
Makes Christianity illegal too. And that's where that persecution rises all the way up through Domitian and others. But now that, so just as Christianity, these people were associated as being the same as Christianity, same thing Paul teaching. On the flip side of that, when Judaism declared illegal, Christianity being seen as a sect of Judaism is declared illegal too. So, then the city clerk gets up and he quiets the crowd. Men of Ephesus, what man is there who does not know that the city of Ephesians is temple guardian of the great goddess Diana and of the image which fell down from Zeus? I've tried to figure out whether this guy actually worshiped Diana or not. I still don't know. He kind of makes a statement there that they would take for granted. What man that doesn't know that? He's going to the point, why are you fighting about this? And notice, therefore, since these things cannot be denied, you ought to be quiet and do nothing rashly. He's not saying these things are factual. He's saying, everybody knows this. This is what we have. We have this, and the legend is that it came down from Zeus. Okay? For you have brought these men who are neither robbers of temples nor blasphemers of your gods. They haven't taken nothing out of their temples. The only thing they did is deny their belief in the gods. So his point is, they really haven't done you no wrong. But notice what he goes on. Therefore, if Demetrius and his fellow craftsmen have a case against anyone, the courts are open, and there are proconsuls. Let them bring charges against one another. But if you have any other inquiry to make, it shall be determined in the lawful assembly. For we in danger of being called in question for days' uproar, there being no reason which we may give to account for this disorderly gathering. And when he had said these things, he dismissed the assembly.
Pax Roma.
Pax Roma. Comes back to that point. You just couldn't. What happened when Paul was seized out of the temple with such a great rule in Jerusalem? That's right. The garrison, the centurion brought out the garrison to free.
To protect it, because they're still under Roman rule, and Rome's not going to let things get out of hand.
There we go. And at the time, he didn't know if it's citizen or not, but something's got to be done. Now they couldn't just like, oh, so here you have 5,000 or more people gathered in this amphitheater.
The culture hasn't changed over there. I mean, you're talking Western Turkey. You put one cartoon in a British newspaper and 5 million people come out screaming about it. I mean, it's just insane. Mob mentality is just insane.
And you're right. But the point comes back when you get into that and you look at it and you got the Roman government going, and if you think the garrison at Jerusalem was large, guarantee you the one at Ephesus was that much larger because there's that many more people. And they would have squelched that. Not only would they have done that, they would have arrested everyone that was involved in that. And you talk about how many, at one point, crosses line the Appian Way. That would have been Ephesus.
None of them, or very few of them, likely were Roman citizens.
That's right.
They wouldn't have had any regard for their lives or anything.
That's right. They wouldn't have cared about them at all. Probably the city clerk and all that, but even they would have to give an account. The city officials would have to give an account. How'd you let this get out of hand? So that his point is, we're in danger. And notice he said, there being no reason that we may to account for this disorderly gathering. What are we going to say? We're mad about this guy's religion?
Isn't that kind of the same thing Gaius did in Corinth when they brought charges against him? He said, if this matter about our law, then I'd listen to it. But
Yeah.
this is about y'all's law and your religion.
Yeah, and then when they beat the ruler of the synagogue, everybody kind of looked around like,
beat the ruler.
No. And I can see here, they kind of let it go. You started this mess and now it's come back to bite you. It appears like he would end up becoming a field. So what we have after this is Paul getting ready to leave. And that's where we'll pick up in the next class. But I think that's the reason for his leaving is similar to the reason that they didn't want him to go into the amphitheater. His presence was causing such a disruption that it might actually hurt the work and promote it. But there is a point of realizing, that sometimes, as God points out through Paul in Romans 13, that God is one to put these in order. Some of those benefits that it had that he used, those laws helped, for time.
So have we just become more civilized, or do we just not preach the gospel the same way that they preached it back then? Because we don't cause riots with our preaching.
Yeah, but we got different audiences today.
Different society.
Different society. If you went over there, just as you brought that mob from God, if you went over there preaching like Paul preached, in fact, if you sit there and started preaching Muhammad is not a prophet. Huh?
You'd be beheaded.
You'd be beheaded. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And there have been problems over there. We're just not aware of many of them. And those things, and it's interesting when you get to studying some of the things that are taught in that culture, what they believe in a God is much like what they believed in a God. If you think about it, their idea of serving the gods of the Greeks was so you could have earthly blessings, receive earthly things at your death, or be preserved, not to die, to go serve the gods, but you would still receive it. Guess what? That's the same thing. Everything that they teach you that you'll receive Muhammad is carnal. It's carnal. It's fleshly. So the culture hasn't changed that much.
But the gospel's not powerless.
The gospel's not powerless, and there have been people converted over there. They tell you, even though Christianity is illegal in Turkey, or not necessarily legal, but not easily practiced, let me put it that way. But there are great many Christian relics, so to speak, that have been preserved. Why? I'll tell you about the culture. Why?
In the off chance they're wrong.
Huh?
In the off chance they're wrong.
No. Money. Tourism. You know what we had to go through to be able to go into Turkey? It took me a while to figure this out. We had to go to this, buses went, the last stop we made was on the way back to the ship. There's all kind of gift shops, souvenir shops all over Ephesus. Okay? These guys come up and try to sell you authentic Roman coins. Okay, that's what they call them, authentic. And some of them, they're lying, but I got a real one. Okay? But the last stop we made, and this was the visit that allowed us to go in, not just go to Ephesus, but go into Ephesus and deal, was a Persian rug maker. So rugs. we could have spent in Ephesus. That was my mindset. But then I figured out, and I talked to one of the leaders, and they're like, we have to do that. Nobody that I know of bought one of them rugs. Cheapest one I saw, cheapest one that I remember, was like $950. And that was in 2006, 2007. Man, what they are now? They're handmade. They're probably worth every penny if you want that kind of thing in your floor. I would never put it in my floor if I paid $950 for it. Huh?
Some people put them on the wall.
That's what I'm talking about. But why do we have to go? Potential for commerce. It's a very money-driven society. If you think America's bad, go to the Far East. Or the Middle East. It's very money-driven. So it's very hard to get people that are carnally focused to be spiritually focused.
I think I read somewhere that if you took all of the splinters of the original cross that had been sold in Jerusalem, it would make up like 40 train car loads of wood or something like that.
Yeah, now you bring up something I was telling Randy about. You know, you go into Peter's Basilica and they got these bulletproof cases up there, 4 of them. I'm trying to remember this guy's saying this stuff in my ear, and I'd had enough of them because we started out on the north side and came through the hallway going into the Sistine Chapel, and you're listening to all this, and you're just looking at all this stuff, and you're going, this idol worship, paganism, it's just paganism. And then you get up there, they got Peter, a wooden throne, say it's wooden, I don't know, thrones sticking out of the wall, and you can't take any pictures because they want you to buy theirs. Okay? At least you're not supposed to. I think I got some somewhere. But anyway, Peter on this throne, sitting there overlooking everybody, all these popes looking up to Peter because Peter's the first pope. Where's Christ? Oh, he's back there on the wall on the cross. But Peter's up there ruling over everybody.
So he was there.
According to them. I mean, yeah. But what I'm saying, they make them ego. Even those tape machines, you're going through that hallway, they got things from the life of Christ and tape machines on this side, things from all these popes on this side. They're making them equal. I realized that from the first time I walked in, they're trying to equal them to Christ. And then you sit there talking, they got these, they tell you these are bulletproof cases because they don't want them to be destroyed. One is supposed to have the cross, parts of the cross that Helena, Constantine's mother, that she found it. And another one's supposed to have the bones of Thaddeus. I don't even remember the other two. But I tell Randy this, I love the fact that it's got all these popes. You got poor Peter, this poor statue of Peter, you kind of feel sorry for it because they've had to replace the toe so many times. And I'm sitting there watching people walk down that roll and kissing that toe. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
And the first thing you see when you go in there is a statue that Michelangelo did of Mary holding Jesus after he came down off the cross. And so you get in there, and you got this guy who's obviously Catholic. He's talking in your ear the whole time because there's so many people in there you couldn't hear talking long. You had to have this thing on your ear. And Clem Thurman, who started the gospel minutes, and I guess did them up to the day he died. With the group, through gospel minutes, this tour was organized. And we're at the back, and this guy's pointing to this thing, he's pointing to that thing, and he's pointing something over there, and he goes, you know what that means? And Clem goes, paganism! Paganism! That's what it means, paganism! And I'm sitting there, amen, Clem, amen! And Clem and I got to know each other because he knew somebody named Alfred Woodard. And he looked me up to see, and took a picture. He said I looked like the guy. I told him he must be a good looking fella. But took a picture of me and his wife with him. But come back to the point, that we had, on the ship, we got to talking, we got to be good friends. And I'm like, that's exactly what it is. It's paganism. And I walked out of there and we got back to the hotel and I told my stepdad, I said, not until this day did I know what it meant to be vexed. When Peter says righteous Lot was vexed, living there day to day, I'm like, I walked out of that place and I just cringed. Because you see all of it going on, and it gets worse when you walk out in that courtyard, because here's all these columns, people praying to these saints. And then they tell you that if you're there, the Pope will come out and bless the people the next day.
But there are a lot of good churches in Rome.
Well, I know about my stepdad they supported the church over in Rome. I'm not saying that. They tell you a lot of things that you won't find out but I'm just saying. It's, and I'm just saying, being in that, listening to that guy promote all this pagan worship and everything, I had a feel of it. And it made me go cringy. But it comes back to that point that when somebody said, and I guess Clem had heard enough too, though he had probably heard it several times. He wasn't going to hold it in. And my mother kind of told me I'd said enough on that trip. And I was biting my tongue the whole time. And the guy I was up front, and when he was doing all that stuff, I'm shaking my head and everything, and he starts preaching to me. And I'm like, through that ear deal, And if you have faith, we can't prove it, because I'm sitting there thinking, where's your DNA evidence, I think that shroud's supposed to be up there too. Is one thing supposed to be up there. And I'm like, where's the reason for having faith? And I was thinking about it because Randy brought up something this morning. Do you know what happened to the snake from the wilderness that was on the pole, brass snake that was on the pole? You know what happened to it?
It's on the ambulance.
Oh, ambulance? Yeah, that's about the best place you're going to see. Hezekiah destroyed it. You know why Hezekiah destroyed it? Because people started worshiping it. So if God's telling us with Hezekiah destroying that, why the cross would never be preserved, why these things that people are searching for would never be there for us. Because they would be worshiping that instead of worshiping Him. And if you can get people to worship concrete columns that mean nothing, how hard would it be to get them to worship the cross of Jesus if you actually had it? Wouldn't be at all. That's what we have to remember. Temptation song?
Yield not to temptation.
Yeah. That's good. That's good to say.
Yield not to temptation, for yielding to sin. Each victory will help you some other to win. Fight that will be offered, dark passions subdue. Look ever to Jesus, He'll carry you through. Ask the Savior to help you, comfort, strengthen, and keep you. He is willing to aid you. He'll carry you through. Yield not to temptation, for you
to Jesus, He'll carry you through. Ask the Savior to help you, comfort, strengthen, and keep you. He is willing to aid you. He'll carry you through.
Brother Ron, will you close this?
You want to announce that?
Yeah, I will. I just got a text, well, at 8 o'clock, probably. It came through the regular group text. His heart rate went up to 170 over 101, so I think that's his blood pressure. So they called the doctor and he put him on a heart pill, hoping it goes down. He met with some surgery scheduled for